I was in the garage when I heard that sound. The sharp dying beep of my pregnant wife's medical device shutting off. My stomach dropped. I ran outside and there she was, Karen. HOA Karen, standing by the side of our house, one hand still gripping the main breaker she just pulled. She looked at me with that smug little smile and said it violated community aesthetics. I yelled that she could have just killed them both. My wife, my unborn child. She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic and walked away. 5 minutes later, the entire neighborhood shook as 2 Black Hawk helicopters roared overhead, rotors thumping so loud you could feel it in your chest. Karen's face went white, but to understand why federal aircraft were now circling her house, I need to take you back 3 months. Before we jump into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you've ever had a crazy HOA moment, hit subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. 3 months earlier, we moved into what I thought was going to be our forever home. Nothing fancy. Just a quiet subdivision 20 minutes outside the city. My wife was 6 months pregnant with our first child. High-risk pregnancy. Preeclampsia. Her doctor had put her on a prescription oxygen concentrator and a fetal heart monitor she wore at night. The kind of equipment that needs power. Constant power. We made sure the house had a dedicated circuit for it. I even had an electrician come out and confirm everything was up to code. The HOA wasn't something I worried about at first. The rules seemed normal. Keep your lawn mowed. No cars on blocks. Paint colors from an approved list. Standard stuff. I'd lived in an HOA before. Never had a problem. But about 2 weeks after we moved in, I got my first notice. Hand-delivered. Not mailed. A woman I didn't recognize knocked on the door, handed me a yellow envelope, and walked off without a word. Inside was a printed violation notice. Our trash cans were visible from the street after 7 p.m. on a non-collection day. Fine, $50. I looked at the timestamp on the notice. The photo was taken at 7:14 p.m., 14 minutes after the cutoff. I didn't think much of it. I paid the fine. Moved the cans. Then it happened again. This time it was the garden hose. I'd left it coiled on the side of the house after watering the front flower bed my wife had planted. Another notice. Another $50 fine. Outdoor equipment visible from adjacent properties. I started keeping notes. I wasn't angry yet. Just confused. Every violation felt like someone was watching the house. Waiting. That's when I met Karen. She showed up one Saturday morning while I was mowing the lawn. She didn't introduce herself. She just stood at the edge of my driveway with her arms crossed and waited for me to notice her. When I finally turned off the mower, she told me she was the HOA compliance officer. Not the president. Not on the board. The compliance officer. A title I didn't even know existed. She told me the lawn was half an inch too long in the back corner. She had a measuring tool. One of those little rulers on a stick. She actually crouched down and measured. Then she took a photo. I asked her if she was serious. She said the rules apply to everyone equally. No exceptions. I should have seen it then. The way she smiled when she said it. A week later, my wife asked me why someone kept walking past our house. She'd noticed the same car parked across the street 3 times that week. A white sedan. Tinted windows. It would sit there for 10-15 minutes. Then leave. No one ever got out. I told her she was probably overthinking it. Pregnancy brain, maybe. I didn't actually believe that. But I didn't know what else to say. The next violation came on a Tuesday. Our house number plaque was faded. The HOA required clearly visible and maintained address markers. We had 30 days to replace it or face a daily fine of $25. I ordered a new one that same day. It arrived in a week. I installed it the same afternoon. 2 days later, I got another notice. The new plaque was black with white numbers. The HOA required white plaques with black numbers. That's when I pulled out the original welcome packet. The design guidelines. I went through every page. There was no specification. Just clearly visible. I took photos. I documented everything. I sent an email to the HOA board requesting clarification and appealing the fine. Karen replied within an hour. She said the rule had been updated at the last board meeting. The new design standards were available on the HOA website. I was responsible for staying current. The fine stood. I checked the website. The meeting minutes weren't posted yet. There was no way I could have known. My wife was getting more anxious. The stress wasn't good for her. Her blood pressure was spiking. Her doctor told her she needed to stay calm. Avoid unnecessary stress. I told her I'd handle it. I told her it was just a power trip, that it would blow over. I didn't know then how wrong I was. Because 3 days later, Karen left another notice. This time, it wasn't about trash cans or house numbers. It was about the electrical meter on the side of the house. She said it was an eyesore, that it violated the community's aesthetic standards, and that I had 14 days to relocate it or install approved screening. The meter was installed by the power company. It was exactly where it had always been, where it was required to be by county code. I called the HOA office. No answer. I sent another email. No reply. That's when I realized something I should have understood from the beginning. This wasn't about rules. This was about control. And Karen had decided we were her new project. I ignored the meter violation notice. Not out of defiance. I just didn't know what to do with it. You can't relocate a power meter. It's attached to the grid. The county won't let you touch it. I figured if I explained that in writing, with documentation from the utility company, it would go away. I was wrong. A week later, I came home from work and found a contractor's estimate taped to my front door. Karen had called someone. Got a quote. $1,700 to build a decorative screen around the meter. The note said I could use this vendor or provide my own solution within 7 days. I didn't hire anyone. I sent another email. Attached the county electrical code. Explained that covering the meter could violate safety regulations and void our homeowners' insurance. Karen replied in under 10 minutes. She said the HOA's architectural standards superseded local code. That wasn't true. It wasn't even close to true. But she said it like it was fact. The fine started 2 days later. $25 a day. My wife saw the first one. She was the one who checked the mail that afternoon. She didn't say anything at first. Just set it on the counter. But I could see it in her face. The tightness around her eyes. The way she kept touching her stomach. Her next doctor's appointment didn't go well. Blood pressure was up again. Protein in her urine. The doctor used the word bed rest. Said if things didn't stabilize, they'd have to induce early. I told her I'd take care of the HOA thing. That she didn't need to think about it. But she was thinking about it. Could tell. That weekend, I went to the HOA office in person. It was only open Saturdays from 9 to noon. I got there at 9:15. Karen was behind the desk. Alone. No one else on the board. No witnesses. I explained everything. Calmly. I brought printed copies of the electrical code, the insurance policy, photos of similar meters in the neighborhood that had no screening. I asked her to escalate this to the full board. She didn't even look at the documents. She told me the fines were accumulating. That if I didn't comply within 30 days, the HOA had the right to place a lien on the property. I asked her if she understood that my wife was high risk. That we had medical equipment running in the house. That we couldn't afford to play games with the electrical system. She said that wasn't her problem. Not her concern. Not something she could consider. Not her problem. I left before I said something I'd regret. The fines kept coming. $25 a day. I stopped opening them. Started throwing them straight into a folder. I'd deal with it later. After the baby came. After my wife was safe. But 2 weeks later, things got worse. I came home one evening and saw Karen's car in our driveway. She wasn't inside it. I found her in the backyard. She'd let herself in through the side gate. She was taking photos of our back patio. We'd put up a shade canopy. One of those pop-up gazebos. My wife needed it. She couldn't sit in direct sunlight for long. Doctor's orders. I asked Karen what she was doing in my yard. She said the HOA has the right to inspect properties for compliance. That it was in the bylaws. I asked her when she scheduled the inspection. She said she didn't need to. I told her to leave. She smiled. Took 2 more photos. Then walked out the side gate like she owned the place. The violation notice came the next day. Unapproved temporary structure. I put in a formal complaint with the HOA board. Cited the bylaws she claimed gave her authority. Turned out that section only applied to external inspections from the street or common areas. She had no right to enter my yard. The board never replied. But the fines stopped. For about 3 days. Then I got a new notice. This one wasn't about the meter or the canopy. It was about our front door wreath. My wife had put up a simple grapevine wreath. No lights. No decorations. Just greenery. Something to make the house feel like home. Karen said it wasn't on the approved seasonal decor list. $50 fine. I took the wreath down. I didn't want my wife to see another notice. That's when I started digging into the HOA itself. I requested copies of the board meeting minutes for the past 2 years. I pulled the community bylaws. The original CC and RS from when the neighborhood was developed. I wanted to know exactly what Karen could and couldn't do. What I found made my blood run cold. There had been 7 board meetings in the past year. Karen had attended all of them. But she wasn't just the compliance officer. She was the treasurer. And the secretary. She'd consolidated 3 roles into one. The board president was a guy named Tom who worked overseas. He attended exactly 1 meeting. By phone. Karen was running the entire HOA by herself. And according to the financials, she'd authorized over $40,000 in compliance consulting fees paid to a company that didn't exist. I ran the name. No business license. No LC. No registration. The address on file was a P.O. box. I didn't know what to do with that information yet. But I kept it. Because 3 days later, my wife woke me up at 2 in the morning. She was in pain. Contractions. Too early. We were only at 34 weeks. I called her doctor. Grabbed the hospital bag. Helped her to the car. We spent 6 hours in labor and delivery. They stopped the contractions. Gave her medication. Monitored the baby. Everything was okay. But the doctor said she couldn't go through that kind of stress again. 1 more episode and they'd have to deliver. We came home exhausted. Terrified. Grateful. And that's when I saw it. Another notice. Taped to the front door. This time it wasn't about decor or trash cans. It was about the medical equipment. Karen said the oxygen concentrator was visible through the front window. That it was medical equipment storage and violated the residential use only clause. She wanted it moved to the garage. Or covered. Or removed from view. I stood there holding that piece of paper, my pregnant wife barely able to stand next to me, and something inside me just stopped. Not rage. Not panic. Clarity. I knew exactly what I had to do. But I didn't know that 48 hours later, Karen would make a mistake so catastrophic that it would bring the federal government to our street. I went back inside. Helped my wife to the couch, made sure she had water, her medication, everything she needed. Then I walked into my office and started making calls. First call was to a lawyer, someone who specialized in HOA disputes. I explained everything. The fines. The medical equipment, the fake company in the financials, the unauthorized yard entry. He told me I had a case. Multiple cases, actually. But litigation would take months. Maybe a year, and it would cost me more than the fines. I thanked him and hung up. Second call was to the County Code Enforcement Office. I asked if an HOA could require relocation of a utility meter or demand screening that blocked access. The guy on the phone laughed. He said if anyone tried that, I should report them immediately. It was a safety violation. He took Karen's name. Said he'd open a file. Third call was to my old unit. I hadn't talked to anyone from my Air Force days in over 2 years. But I still had numbers. I reached out to a guy I used to work with. Someone who'd gone on to work in contract oversight. Federal side. I didn't ask him for favors. I just asked him a hypothetical question. If someone was operating fake vendor contracts and funneling HOA funds into a shell company, would that be wire fraud? He said yes. Especially if any of the homeowners were military, federal employees, or veterans. Because HOAs in certain jurisdictions fall under interstate commerce rules when fraud is involved. He asked me why I was asking. I told him I'd send him something soon. I spent the next 6 hours combing through every document I had. Every meeting minute. Every fine. Every vendor payment. I cross-referenced names, addresses, business filings. I built a timeline. Karen had been running this scam for at least 18 months. Maybe longer. By the time I finished, it was almost midnight. My wife was asleep on the couch, her monitor beeping softly beside her. I sat there in the dark and realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. The next morning, I filed reports with the county, the State Consumer Protection Bureau, and sent a full package to my contact on the federal side. I didn't know if anything would come of it, but I'd done what I could. Then I went to work, came home, checked on my wife. Normal day. That's when Karen made her final mistake. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the garage. I'd been organizing some old tools, trying to keep my mind off everything. My wife was inside, resting. She had her oxygen running. The fetal monitor strapped on. Everything was stable. Then I heard it. That sound. The sharp, dying beep of the concentrator powering down. My stomach dropped. I ran outside and there she was. Karen. Standing next to the side of our house. One hand still on the main breaker. She'd pulled it. Completely off. I didn't yell. Not at first. I just stared at her. She looked at me with that same smug expression and said the electrical meter housing was still non-compliant. That she was within her rights to disable power to force corrective action. I told her my wife was on medical equipment. She said that wasn't her problem. I told her she could have just killed my wife and my child. She rolled her eyes. Told me I was being dramatic. Then she turned and started walking toward her car. That's when I heard the sound. Faint at first. A low thumping in the distance. Karen heard it too. She stopped. Looked up. The sound got louder. Deeper. The kind of sound you feel in your chest. Then they appeared. 2 Black Hawk helicopters. Coming in low over the tree line. Rotors hammering the air so hard the ground seemed to vibrate. They swept directly over our neighborhood. Close enough that I could see the markings. Military. Not local police. Not news. Federal. Karen's face went white. The helicopters circled once. Then landed in the open field at the end of our street. Less than 200 yards away. I didn't move. I just stood there watching her. She looked at me. Then at the helicopters. Then back at me. And for the first time since I'd met her, I saw fear. She got in her car and left. I went inside. Flipped the breaker back on. The concentrator beeped back to life. My wife was shaken but okay. I told her to stay calm. That everything was fine. Then I walked back outside. 2 men in suits were walking up the street. Behind them, a 3rd man in tactical gear. They had badges. Federal agents. They asked if I was the homeowner. Said yes. They asked if I'd filed a complaint regarding financial fraud and interference with medical equipment. Said yes. They told me they'd received credible reports that the HOA president had been operating fraudulent contracts and that there was now an active investigation into wire fraud, elder abuse, and several other charges. But the thing that escalated it? The thing that brought them here in helicopters? One of the homeowners in the neighborhood was a retired 2-star general. Another was a federal judge. Both had been paying into the HOA for years. Both had been defrauded. And when I filed my report, it triggered a federal task force that had already been building a case. They asked if I'd be willing to provide testimony. I said absolutely. They thanked me. Told me someone would be in touch. Then they walked back toward the helicopters. I stood there in my driveway and watched them lift off. Karen's car was still gone. But I knew she'd seen everything. And I knew that whatever happened next, she'd brought it entirely on herself. What I didn't know yet was just how far the fallout would spread. The next 72 hours were a blur. Federal agents came back twice. Once to take a formal statement. Once to walk through the timeline of every violation, every fine, every notice Karen had issued. They asked for copies of everything. I handed over the folder I'd been building for months. They thanked me. Told me I'd done their job for them. My wife's doctor ordered her to stay on strict bed rest. No stress. No surprises. I didn't tell her most of what was happening. I just told her the HOA situation was being handled. That she didn't need to worry anymore. She didn't ask questions. I think she was too exhausted to care. But word spread fast. By the end of the week, Half the neighborhood knew something had happened. They saw the helicopters. They saw the agents. And they started talking. Turns out we weren't the only ones. A retired couple 4 houses down had been fined over $6,000 in the past year. Most of it for things like lawn height, mailbox paint, and holiday decorations left up 2 days past the HOA deadline. They'd paid every fine. Never questioned it. They thought that's just how it worked. A single mom across the street had been cited 11 times for her son's bike being visible in the driveway. $50 each time. She'd been saving up to move. A veteran 2 blocks over had been fined for parking his truck in his own driveway. Karen said it was commercial because it had a toolbox in the bed. He'd filed a complaint with the board. It was never answered. Everyone had a story. And every single one of them involved Karen. The HOA called an emergency meeting. I didn't go. But my neighbor did. He told me later that Karen didn't show up. Neither did the board president. Only 3 board members were there. None of them knew what to say. The room was packed. People were angry. They wanted answers. One of the board members admitted they'd been hands-off. That they trusted Karen to handle day-to-day enforcement. That they didn't realize how far it had gone. Someone asked about the finances. That's when things got quiet. Because no one on the board had reviewed the financials in over a year. Karen had been filing the reports herself. Approving her own expenses. Signing off on her own vendor payments. The board voted that night to suspend all fines pending an external audit. 2 weeks later, the audit results came back. Karen had embezzled nearly $78,000. Fake vendor contracts. Payments to shell companies. Reimbursements for compliance consulting that never happened. She'd even billed the HOA for mileage driving to properties she claimed to inspect. Properties that didn't exist. The HOA filed a lawsuit. The state opened a criminal investigation. And the federal case moved forward because of the wire fraud and the involvement of protected individuals. Karen was arrested a month later. I didn't see it happen. But I heard about it. She was escorted out of her house in the middle of the afternoon. Neighbors stood in their driveways and watched. No one said a word. She made bail. But her lawyer recommended she plead. The evidence was overwhelming. She pleaded guilty to wire fraud, embezzlement, and several lesser charges. She was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, ordered to repay the full amount, and banned from serving on any HOA or community board for life. The HOA dissolved 6 months later. Not because of the lawsuit, because no one wanted to be part of it anymore. The reputation was destroyed. People stopped paying dues. New board members couldn't be found. The property management company dropped the contract. Eventually, the neighborhood just let it go. We still have a loose covenant. Basic stuff. But no enforcement. No fines. No compliance officer. It's quieter now. My daughter was born 5 weeks after the helicopters landed. Healthy. Full term. My wife recovered slowly, but she recovered. We stayed in the house. We thought about moving. But this place felt different after everything. It felt like ours. I see some of the neighbors more now. We talk. Not about the HOA. Just normal stuff. It's weather. But every once in a while, someone new moves in. And they ask about the HOA. About the rules. And someone always tells them the story. About the compliance officer who cut power to a pregnant woman's medical equipment. About the federal agents. About the helicopters. It's become neighborhood legend. But for me, it's just a reminder. A reminder that rules without accountability are just control. That power, even small power, can be abused. And that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect the community are the ones you need protection from. I still have the folder. Every notice. Every fine. Every email. I keep it in a box in the garage. I don't look at it. But I know it's there. Because if it happened to us, it's happening to someone else. In some other neighborhood. Some other HO. Some other family just trying to live their lives. And maybe they don't have a folder. Maybe they don't know their rights. Maybe they don't have someone they can call. But they should. Because the moment you stop questioning authority is the moment authority stops answering to you. Karen learned that the hard way. And so did everyone who let her get away with it for so long. I never saw her again after the sentencing. I don't know where she is now. I don't care. But I do know this. Every time someone in this neighborhood gets a notice now, they read it twice. They ask questions. They don't just pay the fine. And that, more than anything, is the real victory. Not the lawsuit. Not the jail time. The fact that no one here will ever blindly follow the rules again. So if you're watching this and you live in an HOA, ask yourself, do you know who's enforcing your rules? Do you know where your dues are going? And if someone knocked on your door tomorrow with a violation notice, would you know your rights? Because I didn't. Not until it was almost too late. Don't make the same mistake.